How could this election have been so close? Are you sick of that topic yet? Since Election Day, airwaves and the internet and the newspapers have just been filled with all these analyses and expressions of shock or glee, depending, and assessments of blame. Oh, if only this, if only that. The response of many people, including my own sister, who's been a newswoman all her life, as I have been, has been to turn off the TV and shut down their laptops and just try to tune it all out. Sister Joanna has given up her New Yorker, she tells me, for a subscription instead to Bon Appetit. And she is vowing to spend the next 4 years hiding out in her kitchen. And, I get that. It's really tempting. I thought about quitting the university immediately because you can't really teach journalism without paying attention to the news. And I'm wondering about this podcast. Does anyone really want more political analysis? I'm not sure I do. And what can I add that you haven't already tuned out of hearing elsewhere? At the very least, if I keep doing it, I may have to change the title, because think about it. I don't think we're on the brink anymore. I think we have crossed over the edge and we've leaped into the abyss. Everything seems different. I don't know the long-term resolution, I'll tell you that right now, but I am going to spend a little bit of time, starting right now, talking to people who can help me understand. And you are welcome to listen in. I want you to do that, starting with the episode this week. There's going to be minimum blaming, but a little, I admit. And no, what is next? We're all going to die. None of that. No simplified verdicts about this. Here's what I'm really trying to get at. I understand that working class Americans are unhappy about high prices they have to pay and their bleak futures, and they think immigrants are making everything worse. Sure, of course I get that. That's been drilled into our heads now since 2016, since Trump's first victory. But how could the voters in 2024, even feeling this way, see Trump as the person who would champion them and fix these problems for them? I just have this feeling that more than misogyny has worked, more than racism, although I don't discount that. I just don't think it's the whole answer. There's more than lax democratic messaging, although it was really dumb for Joe Rogan to not be included in Harris's agenda. I don't think it was the media. What really is a theory that can explain it all? So my first guest on this topic is going to be Steve Greenfield. He is an unusual person, interesting, and a character. He's a longtime firefighter in New Paltz, and he's held a variety of appointed city positions there as well. He is a former Green Party activist, and he is not a fan of Donald Trump's. He's an economist by way of studies, and he's also looked at voter behavior up close. He's tested ways to change that behavior as a member of a third party, obviously. He ran a short primary battle against Hillary that won him no friends. He championed gay rights in New York State, also won him a few enemies. And I've been intrigued by his social media writing, which is full of frustration and anger, yes, but they are very smart. And he sees what happened on Election Day, very avoidable, should not have happened. I want you to listen in as he tells me his theory of triangulation and about how the Democrats now are so very like the Whigs of 2 centuries ago. In follow-up episodes, I'm going to get other people to talk to us. I'll be speaking with people like Ryan Horstmeyer, who is a lawyer, a lobbyist. He's a longtime Democratic official in very red upstate New York, and he knows about losing. He knows about what you have to do when you lose and more. So what I'm saying is, please stick with our mail on the brink, now a little off the brink. Stick with us a little longer. Okay, I got to tell you, I'm a little afraid of the next guy I'm bringing on. My next guest is not a fan of me or of WAMC or of the Democrats in general right now. He's very caustic and well-spoken, and that's frankly why I wanted him on here. I kind of like these people. This is Steve Greenfield. He is 63. He lives in New Paltz. If you have anything to do with New Paltz, you know his name. He is a longtime firefighter there, fireman. He is a former New York State and National Committee member of the Green Party as well. He's held a variety of posts, appointed posts in New Paltz. He has run for Congress 3 times, I think, at least. And he is an organizer. He has done civil disobedience, actions against non-defensive war, fossil fuel use, ICE, and police misconduct. Really interesting guy. He is not anti-democratic, but he's very mad at the Democratic Party right now. So if you were in charge of the world, Steve, what would you have the Democrats do right now?
Okay, let me start. Let's backtrack for a second. Backtrack for a second, because it's actually important to not let this kind of thing go and be left hanging there without a response. I don't think it's really fair to say that I'm not a fan of yours. I don't think it's fair to say I'm not a fan of WAMC. I don't think that would be an accurate thing to say, given how frequently I listen. You know, if I was really not a fan, I would.
Okay, I'll just say you're a critic then.
A critic, right. Because what happens when I listen to you, what happens when I listen to the round table, when I listen to all the important pundits, whether it's on WAMC or a larger mainstream network or anything like that, or in the New York Times for that matter, I am stimulated to thought. And the kind of character I have, the kind of life I've lived, I love being stimulated to thought. When I was young, I read, William Safire and William F. Buckley. I read people that I wholeheartedly disagreed with because I loved the way that they engaged in the discourse. If you don't ever bounce ideas that aren't necessarily indigenous to your own thinking in and out of your brain on a regular basis.
Oh, wow.
Your brain,
I'm becoming a fan of yours just listening to this. That's absolutely right.
You calcify. It's like going to the gym. It's like getting your exercise. And the other thing about that is that every once in a while, when you least expect it, you hear something that makes you go,
oh, yeah.
Because we're mortal, right? We don't individually think of every good idea on our own. And if all you're listening to is people that you agree with, then you're never going to get that aha moment. You're just going to kind of get that amen choir thing going.
Right. Which is not interesting at all. You're right about that. All right, so now go to my question. Okay. So you're in charge. You get to decide. The Democrats have had a decisive loss. They didn't expect it. They're horrified. People are feeling bad. What do you do? So week after the election, what are you going to do?
Okay, I will start out by saying that I do not agree that they did not expect it. I would say that they were hoping that would not be what would happen, but it was certainly within the realm of what they were expecting. Unlike 2016, this was by no means a shock. This was being tracked every step of the way.
I agree with that.
And so the decision that was being made at the time that everybody got together and agreed to pressure Joe Biden to leave the race, they were already on track to bring somebody in that would essentially be continuing Joe Biden's campaign, but just without being Joe Biden. And they were very explicit about that, because when people were talking about entertaining the notion of other entrants to be considered for the nomination at the convention, one of the biggest arguments that we witnessed every day going out there was that if it wasn't Kamala Harris, that candidate would not be able to access the existing funds that the Biden campaign had already raised, and that would be a dramatic liability. Now, I have run federal campaigns. Besides the 3 congressional races, there was the brief primary against Hillary Clinton in 2005 for Senate in New York State. That statement that they were putting out is not true. It may have been true that Kamala, that some other candidate that could not have spent it directly, but 100% of Joe Biden's existing raised funds could have been transferred to the DNC or a PAC or some other source that could have spent the entirety of it in support of the campaign.
So what was the goal then? Why did they want her specifically?
They wanted her specifically because of this age-old, very ruinous theory that only the Democratic Party holds. The Republican Party does not hold this theory, and it totally supports why they win elections so frequently, even though their overall numbers in the population are much lower than people who are liberals, which is that the belief among Democrats is that a primary campaign of any kind is threatening because it makes it look like you're arguing with each other. It makes you look like you're undercutting each other. All of you have to individually raise funds when all of you could be working to raise funds for just one candidate. Blah, 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 et cetera, and so forth. And yet the Democrats themselves in the 2020 election have the most absolute proof laying right in front of them that that theory is completely false, because there was a massive primary and there was all kinds of negative statements being made by each other. Kamala Harris made terrible negative statements about Joe Biden before withdrawing from the campaign. And he ended up nominating her to be vice president. And they won by what, 9 million votes? I mean, so this idea that an argument, the flaw with the theory, the reason that you want a vital primary system all the time is that when people feel like they're on the same team, it's very easy for them to set aside their disappointment about not getting the choice they were advocating for and pull for the team. Like when you move from the playoffs to the World Series, right? Like if you don't end up being the starting pitcher, fine, because the team won the playoffs. You're now in the World Series. And what happens with the voters when they're able to be part of a vigorous debate and primary process is that at least they feel like they were stakeholders. They made a contribution. They were involved. Okay, their preferred candidate didn't end up prevailing, but that's what the majority of the people on their team were preferring. And now we're going to pull together and get the rest of the way across the finish line. We've seen the Republicans do this time and time again. They never shy away from a vibrant primary season. And the Democrats always do everything they can and use these unproven arguments that holding a vital primary would somehow drag down the general.
You don't think that Bernie hurt and weakened Hillary Clinton?
Oh, no, he fantastically strengthened her. I'll tell you exactly what Hillary Clinton. No, listen. Remember, I'm somebody who ran against Hillary Clinton.
I know you need to tell our listeners about that too, because I did leave that part out of your introduction.
We'll get to that. What Hillary Clinton needed to do. Now, you have to remember, Bernie Sanders did attack the corporatist policies and the warmongering policies of the mainstream of what used to be called the DLC back in the 90s. They've dropped that name now, but essentially the corporate center, business, socially liberal, dominant faction of the Democratic Party. He did attack them at much on the same terms that his summary of the election failure just was, is that people are losing interest in being held hostage by the Democratic Party on the grounds that the Republican Party is worse, and they're really aching to see that somebody address what they want. Now, nobody ever dreamed. When Dennis Kucinich did that back in 2004, what did he get? 1% of the primary vote and left after like 3 primaries?
Right.
You know? But by 2016, so much of the needs of the American public had been left unaddressed on the table that Bernie Sanders entered this. Hardly anyone had ever heard of him at this point. Let's remember that. Like hardly anybody in America outside the Northeast and outside of, progressive and left-wing circles had ever heard of Bernie Sanders. By the time the primary season was over, he had gotten 13.1 million votes. It was an astonishing thing. He was at about 45% of the total. And the majority of those 13.1 million votes were from people who never voted. He was like, Trump.
Yeah.
Trump also.
It's like Trump has done the same thing, right? And there are people right now saying that the Democrats lost this race back when they shut out Bernie Sanders. They did not let his voice prevail. It's hard for me to hear as a strong Hillary supporter.
Neither one of us are old enough to remember this, but we are both more than old enough to remember the history of this. Back in 1932, a New York governor by the name of Franklin Roosevelt decided he would run against the mainstream of his party and run in a very aggressive campaign focusing on solving the problems of the Great Depression through direct hiring, direct employment programs, what in those days would have, and in these days would have been called socialism. And it's not even that radical a notion, right? Aren't all public school teachers government employees? Aren't all firefighters and police officers, highway workers, government employees? Our lives are filled through and through with government workers. If they don't fix the roads, then our private employers can't even get us to work, right? I mean, with socialism, public colleges, the fact that we're literate, this is all done through socialism because there's no way to make a profit by making people literate, right? So we handle those things through the public sector. So Franklin Roosevelt ran on a program of an aggressive direct hiring platform. And at that time, there was the rising vote totals happening in the Socialist Party, first with Eugene Debs and then Norman Thomas. And so Franklin Roosevelt got really hip and he said, I'm going to go with minimum wage and Social Security. I'm going to grab a couple of things that a lot of people have been voting for Norman Thomas over, and I'm going to put them in the Democratic platform. And it was extremely controversial at the time. But what happened in 1932 is that Norman Thomas went from somebody who was getting double-digit percentage points to somebody who was getting 1%. Because even back then, everyone understood that getting 10% of what you want is better than getting nothing. It's better than getting none of what you want. And if a mainstream candidate adopts just one or two planks, the so-called third-party drain of vote problem immediately disappears. Like, I'm a career third-party voter. I voted for Harry Commoner in 1980, my first presidential election. And obviously, no, I did not cause Ronald Reagan to get elected, right? That whole thing. What you need to do is you need to build votes, right? When Donald Trump ran for president in 2016, he didn't care how crazy some potential coalition partner was, whether they were white supremacists, whether they were conspiracy theorists. He welcomed them all because he somehow intuitively understood that elections are about addition, not subtraction.
Interesting.
And so what Hillary needed to do, I knew she was going to lose the election the day that she announced that the reason that she didn't support tuition-free public college, which America had had from the Civil War through the 1970s, without anyone, they were started in the Civil War, man. If we had enough tax money to pay for public college during the Civil War,
why not now?
We really have enough money for it now. That she would say, and try to sort of create a faux populist spin on the thing by saying that if we did that, it would create an unfair handout to rich people who don't need it. I face palmed in the biggest possible way and said, you've got to be kidding me. Do any of the people in America who can't afford the social mobility that higher education would provide to their children really care if 2 or 3 rich people go to SUNY Albany? Like, does anybody really care in the size of that student body? But she felt that that was a winning argument and a way to suppress the idea that she needed to bring some of the Bernie enthusiasm about some of these for the people type policies into the platform. And yet Bernie went out there and he campaiged for her anyway. He campaigned for her. He didn't dismiss her.
Oh, no, come on. I remember at the
look, I've heard you argue about
Billy, at the convention, he just sat there and let his supporters harass her. It was terrible. He never supported her.
He's not in control of people. Rosemary,
they want to be control of the presidency.
There's 13.1 million of them. Do you really expect that to be? But better yet, as you feel that could have been under his control, but why couldn't agreeing to tuition-free public?
Oh, it should have.
Have been under Hillary's individual control, which it most certainly was.
Steve, I do not approve of everything Hillary did. She supports Israel's, what I think is a genocidal policy. She's in favor of that. Afghanistan, I don't approve of that. There's lots I don't. But we are now ending up with Donald Trump.
Right.
And really, you really think that we have, because, I don't know, pick any of your reasons. The Democrats pushed woke policies or socialism. The Democrats pushed. You think those are the reasons we've ended up with him? Why have we? What's the failure?
Any of those things have anything to do with why Donald Trump is president.
Why is he president?
I think that Donald Trump got elected president in 2016 and got elected again just now. I think kind of like the TV Guide synopsis version of it is the thing I was just talking about, which is that since the 1970s, broad swaths of the American public have lost access to the social mobility of higher education at the same time when technical changes in our economy were making higher education, whether it was 2-year trade school or 4-year academic liberal arts colleges, absolutely necessary to social mobility, right? The mining
absolutely, that's true.
Mining and manufacturing and agriculture combined now represent only 8% of the total employment in America.
Absolutely.
8%.
So why are the people who need this voting for Trump?
Why wouldn't Hillary Clinton become a little bit like FDR in this moment? When FDR adopted minimum wage and Social Security from the Socialist Party platform, he became so popular that after 4 terms, we had to pass a constitutional amendment to make sure that nobody could ever become so popular again. This is on the record. This is the history of adopting a couple of populist planks.
Steve, this is great, but again, is all the blame on the Democrats? What have the Republicans put forward that makes them the recipient of the unhappy voters? Why are they turning to them? I am
missing a critical part of voting behavior. You're missing a critical part of voting behavior. Some voters, not most voters, but you're talking about 7 purple states, Rosemary. So when something is simply a function of some voters, you have to pay all that much more attention to it. See, the Clinton campaign program that the Democrats have been using since 1992, I know you're familiar with the word triangulation. A lot of people at home don't really know what that means. Triangulation literally means that you put some people that you consider at the fringes of demand on what your party platform needs to be into the corners of the triangles. They're not the bulk. They're not the center cloud of your voters. And what you're saying to the people that you're relegating and barricading off into those corners is that your vote is being held hostage. You can't vote for Republicans. Whatever it is you want out of us, it's going to be so much worse if Republicans win. And so you have to vote for us. And so I'm going to design...
Yeah, that's what the Democrats did this time.
I'm going to design my campaign to aim at the people that I think are maybe flexible about how they might vote. Whereas you guys, I've got you held hostage.
Right.
And so what really ended up happening is let's understand something. The first time that triangulation failed was literally the second time it was used. It failed in 2000. And then the Democratic Party put together an extremely successful propaganda program to say that it was all about Ralph Nader in Florida, even though Florida was not the only state in that election. There were 49 other states, and Gore didn't even win Tennessee, his own home state, which had 11 electoral votes, and he would have become president had he just won his own home state. And so triangulation failed literally the second time it was attempted, and yet the Democrats have found were so, they felt such a need to remain committed to this program that for 24 years now, they've been running an extremely successful campaign to say that it's the fault of minor party candidates. Back when 2016, they actually blamed the loss on Gary Johnson, the top third party candidate that year, the Libertarian candidate. And I can almost see blaming it on Greens because you might find some overlapping goals of voters for those two parties, single payer health care, less war, whatever it is that, more green energy. But for God's sake, how anybody could put out a press release saying that people who vote for libertarians, who are to the right of the Republicans, would have potentially been Hillary Clinton voters. That's insane. And yet, after 16 years, the Democratic readers of Democratic Party messaging were so immersed in the spoiler mythology that they readily embraced the idea that it could have been Gary Johnson's fault, even though he's a libertarian.
Well, relate that to this past election. Jill Stein didn't get blamed this time, the messaging was nuts. You have Arab Americans in Michigan voting against the Biden administration, against Harris, for what's going to happen in Gaza, even though the winner is Trump, who has a much more pro-Israeli
Right.
policy.
And loves, not even pro-Israel. Let's be frank.
He's
pro-Netanyahu.
I mean, Gaza is a crater. So
this is right. So let's.
What
get
do
to
you
the
do with
voter behavior.
messaging? Yeah, get to the voter behavior. Yes,
voter
sir.
behavior, and remember, we really need to care about really small fragments of voter behavior and stop acting like fringe voters don't matter. Because if elections are really decided, as we know that they are, because of the Electoral College, in just 7 states, and so literally every vote in those 7 states counts, then a huge focus has to be placed on what up until now has been thought of as marginal voters, people we don't pay attention to. And there are some voters who vote in a punitive manner. And I want to be careful when I say in a punitive manner that they are not necessarily doing a foolhardy thing and punishing themselves so as to punish. Let's go. Let me
It feels like they punish themselves.
Let me delve into this for you. If I vote for you, even though you're not providing me anything that I'm asking you for, then what I've really told you is, as long as that other side is scarier, you've got me. You own me. You've got me. I'm going to vote for you no matter how little you offer me, right?
Right. I'm one of your hostages.
That person in the center that the Democrats think, hey, maybe they'll vote Republican if I become too lefty. I'll lose them and they'll go Republican. That person is not considered immoral, right? That person is considered somebody you need to take seriously, even though he too is telling you, I may not vote for you. I may be part of making things worse. Yet for some reason, that person who's voting Republican is treated by the Democratic Party with great dignity.
Yeah.
The person to the left who is considering not voting Democrat is treated like Satan. They're treated like the people that are ruining the course of history.
That would be Latino men right now. That would be Latino men.
You get, not to fall back on cliches, but if there is ever a place where this is true, it's voting. You get more flies with honey than vinegar.
Wow, that's very interesting.
Coming from me as a diehard, since 1980, not only a minor party voter, but regularly a minor party candidate, which, by the way, I've won a couple of elections. So the idea they can't win, that's also a myth, right? Jason West, I helped him become mayor here in New York. He ran those same-sex weddings. And a few years later, everyone...
Mayor in what city, please?
Of New Paltz, New York.
New Paltz, thank you.
Ran the famous 2004 February 2004 same-sex weddings, and not long thereafter, New York made same-sex weddings legal. Like, that's kind of the Norman Thomas theory, right? People will propel the agenda by voting for minor parties. Now, as far as the...
Wait, you have to wait 1 minute. I got to tell people who they're listening to here. This guy with all the words and the interesting ideas is Steve Greenfield. He is an official and a fireman from New Paltz, a perpetual third-party candidate or voter, and he's got some really provocative ideas that I'm so interested in hearing more about. So take it away then, Steve.
Okay. What happens to me if I make clear to the power structure that they own my vote? That as long as Mitt Romney, God, looking back.
Okay, you're talking about black voters now. They've been ignored.
Any voters. Let's say my interest is public health. Like, it's not a racial question. Let's say my interest is public health. I don't understand why 30 million Americans can't go to the doctor.
Right.
And 70,000 die every year because that's a shocking number, right?
It is, yes.
That's 25 9/11s every year, and we don't put any more money into solving it, but we spent $9 trillion on post 9/11 wars, right? Instead of saving 70,000 Americans a year who can't go to the doctor. So let's say public health is my issue. Let's say anything is my issue. Pick an issue, pick 5 issues. Public health, no non-defensive wars, free
education, college. Okay.
Improving education. One thing that matters a lot to me because of the years I spent elected on the school board here and unfortunately being forced to be someone who levied taxes on people. Here's a thing maybe you don't know. I bet none of your listeners know. The New York State public school system today is more segregated than Alabama was when Brown versus Board of Education was ruled. And the reason for that is because we pay for school with property taxes. And because we do that, and because we don't distribute income and access to property equally by race in this country, the better funded school districts are all white, and the less funded school districts are all what people call black and brown and other things that are unwhite, which traps everybody in the cycle of having no social mobility if you're black or brown, or by the way, if you're white and you live in a trailer park. And it's really not all about race, it's about income. So let's say one of the things I've always really wanted, have been trying to get started in New York, is an income-sensitive finance system for public schools so that we don't have more segregated today in blue New York than Alabama was in 1954. I guarantee you, none of your listeners know, even though it's been in the New York Times, that New York State public schools are more segregated in 2024 than Alabama was in 1954. And put a pin in that to get back to it some future podcast.
That's interesting. Yes. You're right.
Organizing page around that.
Okay.
Those are my issues. Let's say those are my issues, right?
Yeah.
And the Democratic candidates tell me they are absolutely not going to address any of those issues. They just tell me that we're not addressing them. Tough nuts, too bad. But you can't vote for the other guys, because if you do, other elements of your life, including a lot of the things that are on your priority list, are going to get so much worse. So I own you. Okay. Now let's say I look at that situation and go, things are pretty bad right now. And we've been kind of limping along and surviving them. And if I agree to this hostage taking of my vote, then we will continue to limp along, whether it's Clinton or whether it's Bush, whether it's Obama or whether we'll continue to just limp along, never solving any of these pressing socioeconomic concerns, never really improving the social contract, never helping Black people overcome segregation, never helping women get out of minimum wage jobs. Everything else that that's on the agenda, it's never going to happen because I keep agreeing to let my vote be held hostage. And so I might say to myself, if I take the risk of surviving 4 years of what people think of as the greater evil candidate, then 4 years from now, the Democrats will have been shown that they can't.
They have to take me seriously. That's
they're going to have to give me at least one bribe. They're going to have to give me one platform plank.
Interesting.
To get my vote back. And that way, even though I had 0 platform planks this year, 4 or 2 years from now when Congress runs again, or 4 years from now, know now that I will have at least one platform.
That's it's an interesting strategy. Any chance ever, especially now, for a third party to really ascend in the United States?
Well, believe it or not, I feel that I do. I want to be clear about one thing. I think that the Green Party has completely abrogated its mission. I had been for many years. I was on the national committee, the New York State committee. I felt that the election of Jason West was definitely something we could say transformed social history in New York State because of the same-sex wedding legalization thing that was accomplished here in this little small town in the Hudson Valley. Which was done entirely because we would not vote for mainstream candidates. But the Green Party operates, it claims, on 4 pillars: environmental justice, equality. One of them is nonviolence, right? The thing I found appealing about it was its commitment to a kind of Gandhi, Martin Luther King nonviolent principle. You do engage in active resistance, but just not with violent force, right? The Green Party has now stepped very dramatically back from that with some very aggressive support for violent political factions around the world and testifying to the validity of their violence. And this becomes you kick out one of the 4 pillars and the whole edifice collapses, right?
Falls apart.
By 4 pillars.
All right, so it won't, the third party won't be with the Green Party, but.
Right, but do I think that one can arise? I actually do, and not for the usual reason. The reason I think that I do, I actually texted you about this.
Yes.
And I ask people about this all the time when they just criticize the whole theory of third parties. I ask everyone who criticizes the theory of minor parties, how would you feel if you got into a time machine right now and we're taken back to the year 1854, and it was Democrats and Whigs, and you would tell these upstart Republicans that third parties only drain, and yeah, the Whigs kind of sit on the fence about the whole slavery thing, but the Democrats are full bore into it, and if we drain votes away, the Democrats will win and slavery will get worse. Like, that would have been the legitimate argument if you think
Yep.
about it, back in 1854. And because we weren't brainwashed into really believing that kind of thing, and parties weren't so deeply established and unmovable at that point in our history, because we'd seen several come and go by 1854, we'd still have slavery today. You know, that, and that's kind of where we are right now. The
So
danger,
you think the Democrats are like the Whigs?
I think that today's Democrats have abandoned a small package of the critical issues of today for so long, for so many consecutive election cycles now, while making it clear that they have the hubris to believe that our votes are held hostage, which they have finally been shown with no Jill Steins, no nothing, no Latin American vote, nothing that they could attribute this thing to other than just simply having lost the election. This is why it's so important to not let anybody blame this on Joe Biden right now. There was a huge bubble, a huge big bump for the Democrats when Kamala Harris spoke at the convention. She was riding high. She raised over
$1 billion in a
in
month.
less than 90 days. How
Yep.
can anyone look at those numbers and claim that the fault lies with Joe Biden for not giving her enough time to campaign? Quite the contrary. The more she campaigned, the less popular she became. She was riding high, and then
Okay, I got to ask you. So
third party. Okay. We have to face up right now to the fact that on fossil fuel use, on school segregation, on social mobility due to public education, on 70,000 people a year dying from no health insurance year after year, year in and year out, and the way that a significant number of people rose up this year to tell the Democratic Party, basta, right? Your hand is
Enough.
up. You're not held hostage. You do not own our votes. You have to be responsive to us. The Democratic Party is right there on the razor's edge right now. They have to decide what's going to happen. Are they going to double down and keep on doing what they did after 2016, after 2000, after all the shocks to this program they've been running? Are they going to double down and do it one more time, which I assure you will make them the Whigs if they do that? Or will they look back at LBJ, when back in 1967, people thought the Democrats would have the Democrats had 75% of Congress in 1970, 75%. Talk about filibuster proof, my God. In the days of the Great Society, people thought that, and especially after Watergate, people thought that Republicans would never again be credible in winning elections at the federal level. Franklin Roosevelt, the New Deal. Are the Democrats of today going to look at what's happening right now? Another Donald Trump presidency, more Supreme Court justices, more of a full control of the federal government running the table with their agenda. Are they going to view that as the kind of crisis that the Great Depression was, and do what needs to be done to solve the crisis, and then maybe pull back later? Or are they going to double down the way the Whigs did and become irrelevant?
Okay, I have a question. If your theory is all right, why does it not apply to Republicans? They lost 2016 presidential. They lost the last midterms. Why were they not on the edge and having to?
They won. First of all, they were on the edge. They were on the edge.
And what did they change?
Were.
They made these big change to get new votes. They did it right, and the Democrats doing it wrong.
Obviously, they made huge changes. One of the things that I spoke about from literally the day after the 2016 election that nobody spoke about ever since, until about 2 days ago, someone finally mentioned it after it was too late in the New York Times, was that when Donald Trump lost the 2020 election, he got 11 million more votes than he had gotten in 2016. Somehow, a 19% increase. In the history of America, there has never been a losing incumbent who gained votes. They even winning incumbents lose votes from their first.
It sounds like you're supporting his claim he really won.
No, quite the contrary. But the thing that we need to remember is that after all that chaos, after all that disastrous chaos,
he got more votes.
And I don't just mean economy and pandemic. I mean the way administration officials were being run in and out of the door.
Yeah, it was horrible.
Fired. Nobody could hold a job for more than 20 days in that administration. I mean, literally the entire government was in chaos, for 4 straight years. And somehow, after witnessing that, the American voters, 11 million more people decided they wanted that to continue than wanted it to exist in the first place. It's an amazing concept. And the Democrats never understood that in 2024, that the base vote that Donald Trump would be starting with was going to be 74 million, not 63 million. They kept treating it, now he's been convicted of crimes, it's going to be worse. Even with the impeachment and all the other convictions he had in his first term, he still gained 11 million votes. The Democrats never learned that Trump grows bigger with these attacks. In his voting base, he becomes more emboldened. He becomes more attractive to people who used to think voting was ridiculous. And overlooking that his base vote, that the platform his next election would stand on was 11 million voters bigger than the 2016 platform was a terrible, tragic error that we are now seeing bear, the worst kind of fruit.
Yeah. Do you understand why what you're saying makes sense to me, and for that reason fills me with despair, that we cannot say to voters, look at this person you're voting for, he does not like women, he is not a good person, can you not see that? And what you're describing, it makes sense as a theory, but not as a way for people to think. Do you see that?
I absolutely do. And I don't want anybody to despair, because the issue is really right now that the Democrats have not decided yet which way they're going to tilt on this question. Are they going to tilt towards being the Whigs, or are they going to tilt towards being FDR? Are they going to recognize? Now, we keep talking, and this also really, really, really troubles me, right? When we were in the Great Depression, whether you were a Republican or a Democrat or a socialist, the rising Socialist Party, which was rising very effectively because of the economic crisis, which was created by capitalism. So socialism was kind of looking good at just that juncture. Is the one thing that everybody recognized is that a dramatic crisis existed. And they were proposing different ways of handling it. Hoover was saying, I'll do pump priming. And Roosevelt and the socialists were saying, I'll do direct hiring, whatever was. But everyone at least agreed there is an amazing crisis going on. Now, in 2016, starting in mid-November of 2016, the liberal intelligentsia started telling all of us that there is an incredible crisis underway. And then for the next 4 years, we actually watched an incredible crisis and series of crises unfold.
Right.
Nobody did anything different. Nobody acted like they were like, I'm a firefighter, right? When I hear an alarm go off and it says there's an automatic alarm in the women's gym at Elting Gym at SUNY New Paltz, I have one set of thoughts that go into my head about, like, I'm definitely not going to go speeding and get into a car accident rushing to the firehouse to get to that, okay? Because that's going to be an alarm malfunction. There's nothing flammable in the locker room at the gym. I don't have to risk my life at an intersection blowing a stop sign. On the other hand, a call we had earlier today with all this dry weather and everything that's going on, my pager says there's a wildfire on North Ohioville Road. There's a brush fire on North Ohioville Road. I go, holy cow. And my whole thinking immediately moves in the direction, not simply of, okay, now I am actually running out of my house, even though I didn't put my socks on. I'm running to the car. I am now putting my head into, I got to translate what I'm hearing on the radio into which truck I'm going to get on and what equipment I'm going to pull off, because it's possible this whole town could burn down, how dry things are right now with these wildfires. Okay,
I get your analogy. So connect.
If I can do that, if I am trained to do that, we are all trainable to do that. If we were witnessing a crisis, why didn't we act like there's a crisis? If we are witnessing a crisis right now, why aren't we acting like the stock market just crashed. It's October 12th, 1929. Millions of Americans are out of work, and for God's sake, somebody better do something. And then we could just argue about what we're going to do, what might work. We're messaging people that the world has come to an end. And then Joe Biden gets on television and says, don't worry, America, we're going to be just fine. Well, which was it? For a solid year now, you've been telling me that if you lose, that the whole world is going to come to an end. And the moment you lose, you go on television and tell me, hey, take it easy. Things are going to more or less be okay. For God's sake, is it any wonder why people have trouble committing themselves to vote for Democrats? Can anyone actually marvel that people feel disengaged and lied to and defrauded and not sure what to think? So what we witnessed right now is a significant number of people in the triangles, in the corners of the triangles that the Democrats have insisted on keeping them in, saying, you know what? If I take one for the team, none of them believe, do you think any Muslims in Dearborn, Michigan think that life for Palestinians is going to get better under Trump? Of course not. Of course they don't believe that. What a degrading and insulting thing for people to be judging about them.
No, I don't think they think that, but I don't understand the judgment to make that decision.
So what they're saying is, and what I have said so many times in my own life, and what I've seen so many other people saying is, we have to take that weapon away from them. We have to take away the weapon that they own us, that they don't have to do anything to get our vote, that they literally don't have to do one single thing to get our vote. We have to defang that. We have to, and we might have to accept 4 troubling years so that 4 years from now, we can vote.
We have some power.
And some of these things will actually happen, because your vote is the only currency you have. If I bought, we all remember American cars in the mid-1970s, right? You and I probably both had cars in the mid-1970s, right?
We did.
Well, when our cars were getting 8 miles to the gallon and were falling apart after only 40,000 miles, nobody imagined that an argument saying, but you must continue to buy those 6,000-pound poorly made Chryslers, because if you don't, some people in Michigan are going to become unemployed and it's going to be your fault. No, we voted with our wallets. We bought Japanese cars. And by the early 1980s, there was a wide variety of incredible high quality, high gas mileage American cars back on the market. And millions of Americans were employed by the car industry. Okay, because we're not so crazy to be that stupid, but somehow in elections, it feels differently somehow. It feels differently. And so we don't want to swallow the bitter pill. We don't want to say we need this medicine. We're more concerned about what the medicine will taste like than whether it will cure the disease. Politics, right?
Let's go ahead. You are listening to Steve Greenfield, who is has some really interesting ideas about voter behavior and about the state of our parties right now. And we are running out of time. I'm going to ask you to finish up your last thought, Stephen. I definitely want you back on. This is intriguing.
Okay, because I'm here to tell the Democrats how to get those voters. And you would think it's some complicated formula, but it's not. I mean, look who I am. We've discussed this. I'm not a credentialed person. Yes, I'm educated. I got an economics degree from Columbia. Fine. I mean, I don't want to I don't like to play the elite education card. We've seen how ineffective that is in the voting market. But I haven't worked in academic fields or business fields or political fields, right? I decided to go in the arts. But I have been in politics, right? I've won elections, small elections. I've helped other people win elections. I've seen great policy changes happen, even though I'm just, more or less a regular guy. And that's the thing is that the regular people are the people who vote. And it's a good idea if people sort of try to take the pulse, ask those regular people why they didn't vote for you. And it's going to turn out, I assure you, because I've been taking this pulse for 30 years now, I assure you that it's not going to be for terrible reasons or for reasons that make it sound like they're mentally ill. It's going to be for reasons that the Democrats can go like, oh my God, those votes have been totally available to me all this time. Why didn't I just ask what I need to offer to get the votes. The same way a salesman will ask the customer, how can I sweeten this up for you? What do I have to do? Should I throw an FM radio in this car and you'll drive it off the lot right now, right? Isn't that how salesmen talk to us?
Absolutely.
When we make a major purchase. So why aren't our politicians taught? If they actually want to win the election, why aren't they saying, when they look at polls and the polls show it's close, wouldn't the first thing you would think as a regular person, wouldn't the first instinct to be, how can I sweeten the deal a little bit? I only got 90 days left. I mean, how can I sweeten the deal? Mm-hmm. What are the polls saying, the things that are troubling people? Let me sweeten the deal. And if people in the business community or other people say to you, no, we don't like those, we don't find those acceptable, you have to say to those people, you have to temporarily put those people in the corners of the triangle.
Yeah.
You need to come back to us in 2 years, because if we lose this election to Donald Trump, we get nothing.
I think the main reason I think the main reason that your theories appeal to me is that it doesn't blame the media. I'm not hearing anything about, oh, she didn't go on Joe Rogan and he really was tapping in to streaming and a podcast and streaming media. I like that you're not.
Let's use Occam's razor, okay? It's possible that not going on Joe Rogan played some little role. I don't care. I don't really care. That's not important. Any of those other little things. If you can come up with one central idea,
right,
that accomplishes this much, right? And you can come up with 1,000 this little ideas that, if you added all 1,000 of them together, might add up to this much. Which of those two things, they both add up to the same this much, but which of those things will you want to do? Don't you want to do the easy one? Instead of trying to think, what of 1,000
things? Yeah.
Might have I changed? No, change one thing. Sweeten the deal.
Gotta tell you, I don't feel much like toasting this week. But the drink, yeah, I want that. So I'm gonna clink my glass now to make it get through the next few years as best we can. We're gonna be watching some of the things we prize the most changed or eliminated, distorted. It's not gonna be easy, but I want us to take cover. This is what I'm gonna do, so I'm advising it for you. That's, you know how bossy I am. Take cover under nature or art, or family and movies and travel and flower and little kids playing ball and comets and backyard fires. And most of all, stick with like-minded friends.